All right, let's wing it. G'day, I'm Rob.
And I'm Dave.
And we're here for a very special, unscripted, unplanned episode of the Doctor Who show because, Dave, something pretty momentous has happened.
Yes, Rob, inevitably, between us recording tomorrow's episode and tomorrow's episode being released, inevitably, the biggest news in Doctor Who happened, and on this occasion we couldn't go without mentioning it, so we've literally just pulled on the earphones and turned on the mic, and we're going to talk about the entire future of Doctor Who.
Yes, we are, because, folks, if you haven't heard, of course you've heard, though, Russell T Davies is making a return to Doctor Who, just in time for the 60th anniversary.
Yes, I have been joking for about 5 months now that somewhere in the BBC they are having the conversation, get me David Tennant, or if not him, a David Tennant type. Yes. And I was close. The conversations actually get us Russell T Davies.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible stuff. I mean, we made the joke on tomorrow's show, which we recorded, about 4 days ago, but people won't hear it until after they hear this. It's very timey-wimey stuff, folks. We made the joke that they'd released the date of the next series, and, is it going out on Halloween or something? But the news they released was so much bigger, because this is not just Russell T coming back, this is the Bad Wolf production team coming in and partnering with BBC Studios. So this is a whole change to how Doctor Who is going to be made going forward. It's not just the BBC anymore.
Is it that big a change, though? That is something that we have time to discuss. I will say, another rapidly developing Doctor Who show cliche is that I discover big Doctor Who news usually in the middle of the night when answering the call of nature, as happened on this occasion. At about 5 a.m. I sort of had to and looked at my phone to see what time it was and saw there was a message from Doc Whom at the Diddly Dum podcast.
Right.
And I looked at it, and it was the news that Russell T Davies had been appointed. Doc, if you're listening to this and you thought my reaction at the time was a little bit muted, it's because it was 5 a.m.
And Doc, you didn't message me, you bastard. No, look, I got up at my normal time. It was about like 7:30 or something. And I was on Twitter and someone was making a joke about RTD. And I didn't quite get the joke. And it was because the joke related to him coming back to the show, which is something that was just not top of mind, not on my mind at all. And I think that might be a good place to start. I mean, you joked about bring us David Tennant or bring us RTD, but was this really on your mind, Dave? It wasn't on mine.
So look, the answer is no. Certainly this was not in any way within my sphere of expectations, other than in a general vibey sort of way that we kind of had a thought that if the BBC is looking at the show now and going, look, we're happy with it, we want to keep it going, but it's not as strong as it was back in the good old days, there would be a conversation going, how do we recapture the RTD David Tennant era magic? Now, somebody around that conversation just gone, do you reckon RTD's free? Just made the obvious comment. If we want to recapture the RTD magic, should we see if RTD wants to do it? Yeah. He'll probably say no, but, let's ask him. And he said yes.
Well, look, I've felt at times the Chibnall era has tried to be a bit like the RTD era, so maybe this will be the Chibnall era done right.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how big or small of a failure you think the Chibnall era is, and that's a whole thing that's happened. And let's say the advantage of us sort of getting this news 6 or 7 hours later than the UK is that we've given Twitter a chance to have all the conversation right through all the emotions from disbelief to joy to why your opinion is wrong. It had all been done by the time we saw it. So, look, I've got an analytical point to make and an emotional point to make at the start. So perhaps should we do some quick reactions in that sense?
Yes, let's start with that.
So look, analytically, I think obviously it's big news. That's not a very insightful comment for me to make. It is big news. It does, however, end what has been a very frustrating 6 to 12 months for us on the show and Doctor Who fans generally, where all the discussions we've had have really been about what we don't even know we don't know. Whereas now we have one big known, which is that Russell T Davies is the showrunner, and a few details around that. But we also now have a lot of known unknowns, in that we know that we don't know who the Doctor is, but that Russell T Davies will be picking it, and that sort of thing. So suddenly our whole conversation is actually framed with much more information than it was before, which is really cool. Emotionally, I think it is very positive news. I think that Russell T Davies is obviously a very talented, creative person who knows how to run television. I've been a big fan of a lot of what he's done since he left Doctor Who. Look, I've said before, both on the show and on Twitter and to friends in real life, because I do have friends in real life. I thought that It's a Sin was fantastic television. Yeah. I thought that A Very English Scandal was fantastic television. After a promising start, I thought Years and Years was kind of not very good and actually dropped it halfway through. And Cucumber was kind of in between those. So I'm a fan of Russell T Davies. I want to see more of his writing. I'm not as excited as a lot of other people I've seen online and some of my friends, because I think that this is the show potentially looking backwards. And this is where we start to get into, and I'll say one more point here, Rob, before we get to your reactions, because
sure.
I just want to move into this. A lot of people are reacting to what they think the news means.
Yeah.
And I think some people are just going, well, Russell T Davies is back, so it's going to be as though we got to the end of Time Part 2, nothing else after that happened, we're just going right back to that moment in time, and it's going to be awesome again. Some even saying, well, this means we're going to get spin-offs again, we're going to get 13 episodes again, assumptions that Murray Gold's going to come back. I think that if the show goes back to just, let's pretend it's 2010 again, that would be a mistake. As good as Russell T Davies is, and look, he was not perfect, and we can talk about that in a moment as well. As good as Russell T Davies is, I want to see Russell T Davies do Doctor Who for 2022-23, not just let's all dust off our nostalgia and pretend it's 2010 again and we're all 10 years younger. Lots of points there, Rob. What are your reactions, though?
Yeah, look, I don't think even if he wanted to, Russell could write like it was 2010, because he's changed. As a person, things have happened in his life that have changed him. As a writer, he's written so much more, and as a writer, you get better as you write more, and your worldview changes, and the world around you changes, and, so much has changed. We can't go back to 2010, so those people are really barking up the wrong tree, to be quite honest about it. I'll say that as an opening gambit. For me, it's not so much going back to the past, because I don't think they will go back to the past, Dave. I think the way forward in television is like 6-part miniseries and stuff. This new series of Doctor Who could point towards the future of Doctor Who. Doctor Who might become a 6-part miniseries type setup. And I'd be okay with that. If they throw enough money at a 6-part series, it could look tremendous. And with Bad Wolf producing it, Bad Wolf, as I was tweeting about earlier today, made the His Dark Materials, a couple of series of that. I think they've got a 3rd series coming, and it looked tremendous. Now, that was something that a big budget film with Daniel Craig and Nicole Kidman and all the money in the world couldn't do properly, and in fact it bombed, and they didn't make the remaining movies in the series. Whereas the television series is amazing. Have you seen His Dark Materials, the TV series? No,
look, I haven't, but I've heard very good things about it. But that is exactly the point I'm making about known unknowns. We know that Russell T Davies is going to make a series. We don't know what it's going to look like, but I think your speculation is almost certainly closer to the money than a reset to 2010, absolutely.
Now, the BBC said he's going to be back in time to celebrate the 60th anniversary, so okay, we kind of assume that because we know Chibnall's bowing out with the BBC centenary, which is like October, November of 2022, and I had been saying an episode or two back on the show that, well, the series will probably come back a year later in time for the 60th, and I would say, given the timing, that's what will happen. He'll come back for the 60th and for series beyond. Now, they say series beyond, but does that mean multiple series? One series? It sounds like he'll do at least a series, the anniversary and a series, but will he kick on and do 3-4 years of Doctor Who beyond that? I've already seen speculation on Twitter. No, he'll just come back for the 60th and a series, and then he'll nick off again. And I'm like, ooh, would you really tie your Bad Wolf sort of mates into the series if you were just going to sort of do essentially a cameo? Like, oh, I'll write the 60th. Oh, look at me, I'm great. I'll do a series, and then I'm off. Would you really do that to Bad Wolf?
I think it's actually a reasonable piece of speculation, partly because RTD has entered well and truly that stage of his career where he likes to do projects and then move on. He hasn't done a lot of series type stuff. So I think it's fair in that sense. In terms of the production company, if they've said to him, look, give us a special to launch, give us a series to prove we can do it, and that gives us 2 years really to find your successor and train them up and have them sit next to you potentially for a while. That's, I think, a very workable thing to do. So I don't think that's an unreasonable piece of speculation, but it is, of course, speculation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of speculation going around. We've got to say this because this is all happening live, folks, as we talk about it.
It is. So, Rob, how do you feel?
I'm happy, Dave.
Good. I'm glad
happy.
You're happy.
Yeah, I'm happy. When I look back on the Doctor Who I've enjoyed over time, the RTD era, and I think I came to this conclusion when we did RTD versus the Moff, when Moffat quit, and we did that big episode. I think I came to the conclusion that I like the RTD era more. There may have been some stories in the Moffat era I really, really enjoyed, maybe even more than stories in the RTD era, but as an era, I think he tied it together better. So I'm happy to see him back. But again, I'm not one of these people who are expecting it to be like it was back in 2010. I'm expecting it to be a shorter series. I'm expecting 6 parts. I'm expecting him to have evolved as a writer and so on. And, look, let's talk about his potential Doctor. I mean, we've done 14 for 14, and you mentioned Hugh Grant, Dave. Now, taking into account Hugh Grant knocked back the role to be the Doctor for the 2005 series, could lightning strike twice and RTD goes to Hugh Grant and says, be my 14th Doctor?
Look, it is very possible. It's something that people have pointed out very quickly, and I think very correctly, on social media in reaction to this, that RTD tends to cast people he knows and likes, and he tends to go back to the same people on a regular basis. Therefore, Hugh Grant, who obviously starred with him in A Very English Scandal, is a very legitimate question to ask. Lydia West, who has now been in a couple of his big series, is a very legitimate question to ask. Ollie Alexander suddenly becomes a much more possible option than perhaps we thought he was, 24 hours ago, let's be frank. And I know you've got another one that you think, and I know a lot of people have seen here, Rob.
Yeah, well, look, a year ago, Dave, back in November of 2020, Tania Miller was tweeting that she knew who the new Doctor was, and you won't guess who it is. And someone on Twitter pointed out that in the novelisation for Rose, which Russell T Davies, of course, wrote, he wrote that the 13th Doctor, not the 13th Doctor, the 14th Doctor, rather, is a tall, bald, black woman wielding a flaming sword. It's this segment where the... who's that guy in Rose who's been tracking the Doctor all through time?
I want to say Dennis or Les or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Bob.
And he's looking
like
at
that.
Yeah, and he's looking at all the other Doctors, and with the fullness of time, Davis has written in, that they're looking at pictures, obviously, of a young man in a bow tie who's Matt Smith, and, a woman in braces running away from a giant frog in front of Buckingham Palace, and that's obviously Jodie Whittaker, and then a tall black woman with a flaming sword. I started to wonder whether Tania Miller knew that she was being written into the book. I wonder if it was just that she was referring to this sort of, little reference in the book, and she's not really being cast as the Doctor. It was just a cheeky thing in the book. Could her tweet have been about that? Because as we said at the time, you don't go on Twitter and announce that you're the new Doctor. That would be highly confidential. Yet it's something that she tweeted, and there is a precedent for it in this book, that Dr. 14 is a tall, bald, black woman. Yeah,
look, Tania Miller is another staple of the RTD production house in the last few years.
Yes, and that too.
So again, the speculation is very possible, and a lot of people, I think, correctly, again, recognise that she's a very, very commanding actress and could be a very strong pick. What we don't know are some of the timelines around all this happening. Obviously, negotiations have been ongoing for some time, and I know we're going to talk about JMS, but JMS, as we mentioned on previous shows, when his agent contacted the BBC said, basically, we are working on a particular line, and if that falls through, then we'll look at others, including your client. Very clearly now what they were looking at is, could they ink a contract with Bad Wolf and with RTD? Yeah. So I think we have some idea of when that was going on. The idea then that this contract was inked to the point that RTD had, rung Tania and said, hey, I'm going to be doing Doctor Who again. It would be marvellous if you could be the Doctor. How do you feel? Probably didn't happen. Did they go for a gin and tonic at some point and he said, hey, I'm in these negotiations and if I got the nod, would you be keen? Maybe. Or it's very possible that they could go in an entirely different direction. Again, we don't know. But yes, suddenly all these speculations of people who have worked with RTD all get a few more credibility points.
Well, speaking of other people who have worked with him, of course, before Jodie's final episode was being filmed this past week and the weeks before, there was speculation that David Tennant would be in it, maybe as some sort of cameo. And indeed, he popped up in town with his hair cut and his beard shaved around the time they were filming, leading people to say, well, it's a fait accompli, the 10th Doctor is in this. Of course, this is leading people to think that Tennant is coming back as somehow the 14th Doctor. I think that's quite crazy. I think he's probably just doing a cameo in Jodie's final episode. Maybe a dream sequence. He probably shows up and says, Jodie, you were fantastic. And oh gosh, Yaz, you were the best companion ever. Bye. It's probably something along those lines. I don't think he's becoming the new Doctor. But geez, it's got people talking.
Look, if you are going back to the nostalgia well to get RTD, you don't have to reach that much further to get David Tennant. I agree, it probably would be a level of desperation, frankly, to just do a complete reset in that way. But with RTD on the table, again, it's more possible than it was when we went to bed last night.
Yeah, well, look, people have been saying it smacks of desperation to get RTD back at all, and I'm not on board with that. I think if you got Tennant back, yes, that is desperation. To me, just getting RTD back just suggests that they're just looking for a safe pair of hands. Maybe the show hasn't gone quite where they wanted. There is a 60th anniversary coming up. They won't have a showrunner for it. Who do you give it to? Well, you give it to RTD or you give it to Moffat, probably. I think it's just a safe pair of hands.
Yeah, look, and some of the early ugly comments on social media have certainly been around some people saying, this is fantastic, Russell T Davies has come back to save Doctor Who, and others saying, well, what do you mean by save Doctor Who? Doctor Who was fine. Do you not like Doctor Who? Why do you hate Jodie Whittaker? And some more reasonable versions of that. And also, other people I've seen, and look, those of us for whom the RTD era is now a very nice, fuzzy, warm memory from when we were a little bit younger, is one thing. But I saw some comments from fans I follow on Twitter who are 18, 19, 20 years old, and one of them pointed out that he was born the year that RTD was last announced as the showrunner. and a couple of people sort of then saying, I know you guys all remember and grew up with RTD and you love him, but he's what was on when we were 5. We grew up with Moffat and Chibnall, so this to us is actually a very weird decision. And I guess it would be like for you and I, Rob, if in 1989 J&T had been replaced by Philip Hinchcliffe.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, which would be a big deal to those who grew up with Philip Hinchcliffe, but there'll be others who go, well, I've never seen Philip Hinchcliffe. He's the guy who made Doctor Who when I was 2.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, lots of different opinions, all very valid. I think most people are really just trying to digest this news. And look, I'm happy. I think it's a really good decision. He's a great writer, depending on what they do. And if they do go full panic button, let's pretend it's 2010, that will be a disappointment. Even something like, I think it would be a mistake for Murray Gold to come back. Now, I know that Murray Gold is almost attached at the production hip to RTD, and it's a natural assumption that he would. But I think that would just be another sign of let's make this like 2010, rather than let's find the 2020s vibe to make this a future ongoing show. That's just my opinion. Others are going to love the idea that Murray Gold could well be in the frame to come back.
Yeah, certainly once you start layering that Murray Gold music on, it will start taking people back. Even if the show has changed in other ways, music is very evocative and can do that, so I'd almost not want Murray to come back from the point of view that it should be something new and fresh,
I agree.
When I think about, what did I like about RTD's prior Doctor Who work, I tweeted this. I said, characters is a big one. He wrote characters very well. The stories were quite adventurous. There was some really great casting in his era, And off camera, I think his work rate was phenomenal. The man is a machine. His mind works a million miles an hour, So I'm very happy to have a showrunner on who's not like, oh, no, I don't want to do the Christmas episode. And, oh, no, we're going to take longer to make these episodes. And, oh, no, we're going to do less episodes. I'm actually looking forward to a dude who will come in, and even if it's just for that special and just for a series, will be hitting that at a million miles an hour. Just really going for it. He is a very unique individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And inevitably, just as his first era did, his second coming will suffer from New Who syndrome, which is that no Doctor Who made now is perfect. And it's only after 5 or 6 years that you start to realise how good it was. I can remember very well watching the RTD era and being very impressed by a lot of it, loving some of it, hating other parts, and not being a fan of some aspects. I've said before that myself and a lot of the friends I was watching with at the time all said, we don't like this kind of soap opera-y thing. We don't like having the companion's mum in the show. But we get that if this is going to have an audience of 8, 9, 10 million, that's the kind of Saturday evening vibe and tone you have to have. We accept that. So, I'm not looking forward to the idea of suddenly going back to the UK and having the companion's mum in it. That's not what I want, but that might be what they need to be successful. So again, RTD, fantastic writer, a lot more hits than misses, but his era wasn't perfect the first time. It looks better in the rearview mirror, like all eras do, and inevitably when his special drops and when episode 1 of his first series drops, we'll be sitting here and we'll have some weaknesses to spot in it as well.
Yeah, and look, Russell has said as much. He says he's beyond excited to be back, but we're time travelling too fast. This is in terms of, speculation. There's a whole series of Jodie Whittaker's Doctor to come. I'm still a viewer for now, so he's not giving any hints as to whether, he's going to get a Tennant-like dude and Murray Gold and go back to the past, or whether, I've done that. I'm not going to have a doctor like Tennant. I'm going to have Tania Miller. I'm going to have this tall black woman with a shaved head. And, I'm not going to have anyone's mother in it. It's not going to be soap opera-ish. I've done that, Or is it somewhere between the two? Who knows? It's all speculation.
Yeah, but I'm a lot more excited by the idea of RTD Mark II than RTD 1.1.
Oh, without doubt. Without doubt.
Rob, you mentioned earlier the comments about the production changes. I sort of said, look, I don't think that these are as big a deal as perhaps you were intimating, and maybe I've done you a disservice there. You can defend yourself in a moment. I actually think that this won't change a lot. It may be a bit of an injection of capital, which would not be a bad thing. We don't know, but it could well be. I think that this is just the reality of how television is made, and indeed, Doctor Who's still being made by the BBC, even though it's BBC Wales, which is, a slightly different organisation. I get those technicalities, but it still sort of smacks a little bit in 2021 of J&T being the last in-house producer at the BBC in 1989. And I think this was just an inevitable, natural thing that has happened in television over a long time. It's the same with the ABC here in Australia, where a large amount of their content is made by an external production house. There's a co-funding arrangement, a deal that the ABC, or the BBC in that case, gets first rights to screen and will screen, so it's got a home, but the actual, who hires the cameras and who hires the actors and all the rest of it works well. And a late dear departed friend of mine was the HR manager for a long time at the ABC. He once said to me that he absolutely loves these arrangements because, in his words, when The Chase is getting really good headlines, it's an ABC production. When The Chase is getting bad headlines, it's an independent network made by a completely different group of people.
It's like when Russell Crowe gets good reviews, he's an Aussie, and when he doesn't, he's a Kiwi.
He's a Kiwi, that's exactly right. Is that sort of similar to your thoughts on the production house, Rob, or do you think it's going to be a real different thing?
Look, I don't think you said anything too out of line or weird there, Dave, but I do go back to a Chibnall quote we had on a recent episode of ours, where he pointed out that, although things didn't look different to us as the viewers, in recent times the BBC drama department had handed over to BBC Studios and things were actually being done a lot differently in the background. And I think, well, here we're going from BBC Studios to Bad Wolf, so that's another step. So at least internally there was a change from drama department to studios, and now it's changing again. So I think things are different, and I don't know, I'm only speculating here, but I think when you've got a production team like Bad Wolf coming in, maybe they're not constricted with, some of the hires or people they have to work with because they're their own company and they hire the people they like and the people they like to work with. And maybe it makes for a happier sort of arrangement rather than just random people being thrown together to make a TV show. Because, again, certainly when I look at stuff Bad Wolf has produced over the years, it's been bloody good stuff. And I think there's got to be something in the 12 secret herbs and spices there that's responsible for that, which you might not get if you're just working with an internal BBC team who could be working on Doctor Who for these 6 months and something else entirely for, the other 6 months.
Yeah, look, that's very fair, and that probably does expand a bit on what I was thinking. And yeah, okay, I accept that, but at the same time, I don't think that this is a big, oh my god, this is the future of Doctor Who, and it's pointing a new direction to go, and then it's going to morph, and it'll be on Netflix. I think this is just how television is made, and it's actually Doctor Who catching up with television more than anything.
Oh yeah, look, I think the streamer thing will happen one day. I have no doubt about that too, but for now, yes, this is just catching up because co-productions are very common. When I look at a lot of the big BBC series I've watched over the past 3, 4, 5 years, they have been co-productions, Yeah, and again,
absolutely.
His Dark Materials is an example of that, but heaps more have been as well. And people don't sort of realise, they just think of it as being a BBC show. They don't think of how things were made or who the producer was or, how this was done. We do that as Doctor Who fans.
Yes. Just as I suspected, a lot of Australians will be absolutely blown away to realise how much ABC content isn't actually made by the ABC. So, Rob, that's all the thoughts I've got other than one, which is to acknowledge that as the official podcast of the JMS for Showrunner bandwagon.
Yes.
Look, we should.
Well, he has listened to us before. He has heard our podcast.
He has. So look, we will just say that if JMS is to lose out to anybody, RTD is a very worthy choice. But I believe the man has made a comment, Rob.
He has. He's jumped on to Twitter and said, "I cannot imagine a better or wiser choice." And I thought, what a gentleman to say that.
Yeah, that's a very cool comment. And look, maybe now that JMS's agent has broken through the transduction barriers that exist around the BBC, is it too much to hope that maybe if he can't be the showrunner, he could write an episode?
Oh, that'd be amazing.
That would be pretty cool.
It would be. It would be fantastic, actually.
But look, very happy, very excited. RTD's great. Lots of caveats, lots of things we don't know. I think there'll be a lot of surprises and a lot of expectations will be dashed or doubled down on. But yeah, that's all I've got, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to watch another series of Whittaker yet over the next month or month and a half. That'll pop. Then there's another year of specials, 3 specials. Then we're 2 years off. RTD arriving. So I think there's going to be a lot of talk, a lot of speculation, a lot of announcements. I think people are going to get frankly sick of it over the next 2 years. But for right now, it's quite exciting.
Yeah, and when you say that, I hope that the knowledge that this is the final series for Chibnall and Jodie and that whole production team, frankly, will actually lead it to just, you know what? Damn the torpedoes. We're just going for it. We're just going to have a great time and make the show we want to make, and there'll be a real energy to it. I hope that what doesn't happen is everybody's sort of like, well, this is good, but where's RTD? Who cares about this? We're waiting for RTD. I actually am more enthusiastic about next month's or the month after's Doctor Who than I was before this announcement, because it does feel like, RTD in Series 4, Moffat in Series 10, when both of those are like, this is our last series, I'm just going to have fun. They were really good series.
Absolutely. And look, I'm on the record of saying Jodie hasn't had a classic story. She's had some good stories, hasn't had a classic, in my view. Could she have a classic in this 6-parter coming up? Could she have a classic in one of those 3 series? Could she have a couple of classics? Is it too much to ask? I hope she does. I really, really do.
I do as well. And also, the lack of pressure on this series to get the show renewed, I think will be a big weight off a lot of fans' minds, in that we were all going into this series potentially wondering if this is the last we'll see of Doctor Who for 5 years.
Yeah.
And now we know that it's not. That pressure, I think, will also potentially help us all to enjoy the new series more.
On that note, fingers crossed, Dave.
Absolutely. We'll be back in not even 24 hours with, what did we talk about? It seems so long
about
ago.
Lungbarrow.
Lungbarrow, that's right. How can I forget? Yes, we talked about Lungbarrow. It seems like a lifetime ago now. Yeah, we'll be back out with all our usual stuff. And when I say we'll speak again soon, I mean very soon. We will speak again very soon.
Very, very soon. Bye now.
Goodbye.
It's a lie. You have, in fact, been doing everything to do with Doctor Who since you left. Yeah. Once you go over,
sitting outside those gates of Cardiff.
I know.
Let me in.
Chris.
We're locked down.
Chris.
We're locked down.
I'm in your garden. This tent is leaking. Let me in.
I went for dinner with Chris Chibnall and he locked us out the house.
Did he?
We got locked. I can't just wonder why we were outside the house. Why were we outside the house? Why were we outside the house? Anyway, we got locked out. That's showbiz stories.